This is part 2 of our interview with former polygamy group member Caleb Owen. Next on Polygamy, what love is this? She was born into polygamy. Her family followed the teachings of Joseph Smith, including plural marriage. Like many young girls, she had been promised to a man who was her father's age, but she ran away. That girl was me. I was lost. Then Jesus Christ found me. I found real freedom. He is a shield to all who will take refuge in Him. This is part 2 of our interview with Caleb Owen. He's agreed to come on the show and tell his story about being raised in the Kingston Polygamy Group, also called The Order, and to tell his story of some of the experiences while he's in the group and his experience of leaving the group. We finished in part 1 where we were leading into the reason why he left. Was there a particular event or teaching that caused his decision to leave? And so now we want to hear his story of actually leaving. What happened, and what happened to make him live, and what happened to after you did leave. So Caleb, why don't we go into that? What was it that precipitated your leaving? How old were you? Why did you leave? And what happened?
Well, I was about 17 at the time, and like I said, I made friends with Ainsley White, who's now my partner, and we were talking for a while, and we were just chatting through text on a cell phone that I got a hold of, which was strictly forbidden according to Order Doctrine, because you can't be talking to someone without parental consent, apparently.
But you couldn't have cell phones.
We actually were able to. The strange thing is, and they're a lot more commonplace in the order than they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
People call and text, and they play video games, and it's really strange because it gives them the illusion of being free, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's true. Mm-hmm.
But
okay.
As the month went by, I started to realize more of how wrong, well, I always knew the order was somewhat wrong. I always had trouble believing 99 to 100% of what they said, and every teaching they taught me, it felt even more and more like just a pack of lies. And at about March, I started planning how to get out, and I realized I needed a couple of things. I needed money, I needed a place to go, and I needed help. Mm-hmm. And I found the help through my actual therapist. I won't say his name here, but he's helped me through a number of issues, including major panic attack, breakdowns, and
mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of stuff happened.
Yeah.
As I was trying to leave. A lot of things happened, and it kept getting worse.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that really did help, though, was before my depression really become a really big part of me. And my family, I say my family, it was really more of my father and my siblings, but not all of them were really supportive of it, not all of them really understood what was going on, and not all of them really seemed like they cared to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
The only ones that really did was a couple of my sisters and my mother, and that was pretty much it. My brother at one point did, but that was the extent of it. But the one who really did help was my partner, Ainsley White, and as it came along, I started trying to figure out different ways to do it, so I started reading more into the polygamist books about how other people did it, how they managed to get money out, and I noticed one of the most primary forms of it was blackmail. I didn't have any dirt on anyone. Well, I have a lot of dirt now because I've left and I'm not afraid to tell anyone, but what I had was plans. I had planned to go to college, and I still do. I plan to go to university or somewhere, maybe culinary school, I haven't decided yet, mm-hmm. and get an education. And one thing that the order actually will let you do, surprisingly, is take money out for an education, because they want people more educated to work.
Mm-hmm. And to bring more money in for the group, purposely for that
mm-hmm.
reason.
Exactly. And so what I did was, I was working on the farm in Territon at that time. I worked the summer up after I graduated from high school, up in Teton, which is a nightmare to work at. I cannot begin to tell you.
And that's what I led in with at the beginning, where you were moving pipe, and you worked so many hours a day. And
I didn't even move pipe a lot. I moved because I got to the point where I was absolutely refusing to move pipe.
How old were you at that time?
That time I was actually 17. I was actually I was 17 at the time. I graduated from high school, and I just had enough. I wasn't going to move pipe, and they couldn't make me if they tried.
Okay.
Well, I did move some, but when I first started working up there, that's when I moved pipe every night.
And you had a younger brother, younger than you, that was also working the same way.
Same way. And
Underage.
he was more willing to do it, but then again, he didn't have the rebel streak that I had.
You have to be a rebel to get out of those places, I'm telling you. You do.
I really, like, they fought so hard to get me to move pipe, and I only did it grudgingly after, like, my dad threatened to not let me stay at the house if I wouldn't move pipe and stay at the farm. Because they wouldn't let me stay at the farm if I didn't move pipe, and they wouldn't let me stay at the house if I didn't stay at the farm. So I ended up having to move some, but I'm rambling on about that.
Okay, back to how you were leaving.
So I was done. I was done with the summer there, and we were allowed to go back to Terraton, and we agreed to any terms to get us off that farm because we both agreed that it was horrible up there. The work conditions, and the work would have been somewhat okay if we didn't have to live with the most anally retentive, rudest people. Like, they were just not happy with us at all. We couldn't do a single thing right, and I'm not going to say their names, but they knew who they were. They were never happy with our work, always complaining about it, and it was just it was a very toxic work environment. So we moved back to Terraton, and we were super excited because now we'd have breakfast in the morning, besides oats and raisins and eggs once a week.
Yeah,
so that was like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And sometimes we even slept until 8, so yay.
Wow.
And we were working on the farm in Terraton, and I had a lot more alone time because I was mowing the lawns and mowing the weeds around the farm, and I had a lot more free time, and I was using that time to, like, call into more places. And I started with a test. I tested to see if I could get $100 out, and I called and I got it authorized. I got it moved over, and I said it was for car parts. And I know it's a lie, but I honestly don't care because they've lied to me that my whole life they can handle a couple of them themselves. And I got the $100. They gave it to me. They let me have it. And I took that $100 and I used it for some of her car parts, but also some of it to go take Ainsley out on a nice date. After that, I knew I could get more. And I decided, you know what, all or nothing.
Now, this is all the money that you had made, that they put on your statement that you had earned through the years. That
was just $100 of it.
But still, you're getting the money from that.
Yes.
Money that you earned working, right? Okay.
All of that.
People probably may not understand. Some people may not understand.
Well, basically,
the financial arrangements that the Kingston Group has.
Well, how that works is you have a statement, which is like a credit card. You have money on your statement, which is like you have money on your card. And then you have a second account, which they call your secret account. You have no idea what's actually on there. They will never tell you the truth.
Right.
And that's where they put all the money you make. And if you want to have some money, you got to call the banking office down in Salt Lake City, ask them to transfer some money onto your statement. And if they approve it, sometimes they won't, say you don't have enough money on your actual secret statement. Not even true ever, because the way I worked, I knew I had money.
Yeah.
And they actually denied $100 at one point because they said I didn't have it on my account, but I checked it on my statement, and they quickly backtracked and let me have it because they realized they'd been caught in a lie. And
so you got your money out, and now you're ready to set up to leave.
I took the $3,000 after I got it out of my father's hands. What he did was he intercepted it and he kept it for a bit, but then I finally got a hold of it, and I put it into a banking account. I put it into a banking account, and it kind of stayed there, and it collected interest for a little bit. It stewed for a few minutes. It was in there for a couple of weeks while I was looking for a place to live. And as I was looking for a place to live, I got in a car accident with an old car. It was I can't remember what the model was, but the result was I didn't have a car, so the plans kind of were set back. I had plans to move originally in October, but I had the accident in October.
Did you tell anybody of your plans to leave, brothers or sisters or friends or anybody?
Mother.
Your mother? And she supported you?
Yes.
Okay.
And technically my father. He knew I planned to move out, but he didn't know when.
Did he try to talk you out of it?
Yes.
Did he threaten your salvation?
Yep.
If you take your money out,
then you don't get to be a part of the order
and you don't
anymore.
get to go to heaven. So money buys your ticket to heaven.
Which I always found is kind of funny, because if you have the mindset that there's always something better, you'll never be happy with where you are. So like I try to live with the mindset that this right now is heaven, and what's next, it doesn't even matter.
Well,
And
Jesus has other things to say about that, but go on with your story of leaving.
Well, after I got the money, we had the accident, and it was set aside, and I had to take $800 of the $3,000. Luckily, rent in Idaho is dirt cheap, and I was able to take $800 out of it and purchase another car. This one is a bit better, and it's in the shop right now. It's got some problems with the radiator, but I'm still
But you got
functioning.
out and you got an apartment.
I got an apartment.
You got a job outside of the Kingston
Actually,
group?
interestingly enough, I got the job before I moved out, so I was commuting to Idaho Falls.
So you made plans in advance and then just followed through. Even though there were setbacks, you still just followed through step by step and made it out without too much
It was a
trouble.
lot of waiting.
Yeah.
And I know I'm probably spoiling anyone else's plans to get money out the way I did it, because they're probably watching this and then...
Different people have used some creative ways to get their money out, for sure. And there's been threats of lawsuits and all kinds of things that's worked. So have you ever been sorry you left? Ever?
Nope.
Never been sorry. Now, what would you say right now would have been the helped you the very most when you left? What did you need that you didn't have access to that would have helped you when you finally got out?
Well, it would have... I'm trying to think of something, because I really had... I had a supportive partner. I had a therapist who would help keep my anxiety down. I had a mother who supported me, and I had the money to do it. The only thing that I really think I could have done differently or needed differently was to have avoided that accident, or have bounced back from that accident a lot faster than I did.
That's something that's beyond our control. So after you left, did you have guilt trips? Did you feel like, oh, I've done the wrong thing, I need to go back? Did you feel like that you've let your parents down, you've let your family down, and go through all that?
I felt that I made my father upset, but like always, he'll live. I will too.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much the extent of the guilt that I felt. Other than that, I was like totally fine, because I can still hang out with them. They're still my family, and I still love them and care about them. But I'm not going to be a part of their religion, and if they don't like that, well, then they're not going to be a part of my life, because it's kind of hard cheese, but I have to stand up for myself. I didn't my whole life, and it didn't get me anywhere.
Now, I don't know if you would even know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it because a lot of people are interested about the lost boys that polygamy groups have. And there was a huge scandal of lost boys with the FLDS several years ago. I know the Kingston group has had that category of boys because there's never enough girls to go around for every man to have plural wives in a polygamy group, period. Do you think one of the reasons that you were let go so easily was because you were an extra male, and so they didn't have to worry about getting you a wife?
I've sometimes considered that option, but I didn't think I was ever going to get a wife in the order anyway.
Why?
Because I simply wouldn't want to pursue it myself.
Oh, okay. So did you see the lost boys taking place in the Kingston group? That kind
I
of
saw some people that I thought should be married. Like there's a person that I know, he's in his 30s now, and he just barely got married to a 16-year-old. And just barely, like it was like last year or so, and he hadn't been married all the time before that, so I guess there was that one. And then I also noticed a lot more people that have been growing up. I know quite a few actually, that I don't know if they just don't have the interest to get married or just don't have the option to, but they're definitely old enough.
What about all of the young girls? Aren't they being picked up by the polygamous men?
They're, yeah, a lot, really fast. There's actually a cousin of mine, she just recently turned 16, and I think she's engaged now. I think she's 16 or 15. I'm not sure which.
Well,
By the way,
they engage them when they're younger and then don't marry them until they're legal. Isn't that what they're doing now?
not all the time. Sometimes they'll seal them and then wait until they're old enough. So they'll still engage in coitus and try to have kids, but they won't be legally married.
Yeah.
They'll just be sealed in God's.
In God's eyes, according to them. Okay. So tell me, what has been the worst part and the best part of leaving?
The worst part was the arguments that I would get, that I got into the first few weeks that I was gone. Like, my dad would come around and he'd tell me about all the mistakes I'm making and how Brother Paul or these other people were trying to convince him to get me to come back. But pretty much just being badgered to come back. And I was just adamant, and I said no, and I feel I had to be strong because I would not have had the strength myself, and that's where I go into the best part of being able to leave is my partner again, Ainsley, because she was my rock. She was the reason that I was able to be strong enough to say no more, because I have really, really bad social issues, and I have problems sometimes saying no.
Unfortunately, that is one of the things that happens for people who leave polygamy groups. They do have the difficulty saying no because we're not allowed to say no. First time I said no to my mom, she slapped me silly, and I was like 12 years old. But yeah, that's what happens. Well, I'm glad your mother supported you. I'm glad you didn't have as rough a time leaving as some have had in their leaving. Now let's look at some of the practices that you noticed inside of the polygamy group, that maybe things that maybe you weren't aware of, or things that you were aware of that was going on. Did you know that young girls were being molested or abused or raped? Were you aware of the abuse that some of the younger generation was going through?
To an extent, I would say yes, because I don't remember the story exactly, but I remember one of the females like talking about her uncle and how he would go after her, like pursue her in marriage, and she's like, I don't want to get married, I want to go to school. And that's the only account I can tell you. That other than that, and even then, that memory's a little fuzzy. I don't have much in that aspect.
So you didn't really know of the abuse that was going on with other people?
Not with the females, but I do remember a bit of, I do know about, I don't know if you'd call it spouse abuse, but like just deprivation because I've been to a couple of Brother Paul's wives' houses. And the difference between his favorite wives and his least favorite wives is just night and day. There's one of them in Huntington, and it's just, it's no better than a slum. There's rotting food in the sink and on the counter. There's kids sleeping in filthy clothes underneath the table. There's carpet that hasn't been vacuumed in years, if not decades. And even if they had a vacuum, it would suck up the carpet with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I saw one of his favorite wives. I can't remember her name, but the house was just gorgeous. It was a 2-story split level. It had a built-in trampoline in the backyard. I had a pool. No, it wasn't a pool. It was a hot tub, and I had a foosball table downstairs.
So did the wife that was living in the slum know about the living conditions of the wife that's living in luxury?
I would assume so. It's kind of obviously he visits from house to house, and he's gone on record like speaking about how his wives work in harmony with each other.
That's never happened in polygamy, ever. Nope. They can say it has all day long, but it just doesn't happen. It's not the way it is. What's the youngest age of marriage that you're aware of, of actual marriage?
15.
15?
15 or 16. I think she was like almost 16, like turning to be 16. That was the one I told you about from last year, who just recently got married.
Yeah. So let's talk about inequality a little bit. We talked about the fringes in part one of how the different families are treated differently, and if you're a fringe family, you're treated differently. But did you notice now? When I was there, they did not want formal education to anybody except once in a while someone from the Kingston family would get a formal education. They've changed that through the years, so now they're allowing more people to get formal education. But do they have preferential treatment of those who can go to higher education? Usually.
In fact, it's split along gender lines mostly, because I remember being encouraged to go into education and taking online courses. I remember that very, very well, and the person who recommended that to pretty much everyone else on the farm, and it was through him that I actually learned the computer programming language, CSS. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a basic web design programming language. But the thing is, I've noticed that the girls aren't really encouraged.
They're not encouraged to. There's some of them. There's some of them who do. Some have gone into legal, and some have gone into real estate.
But they're usually either in the Kingston family themselves, or are encouraged by a very, very dominant female mother.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. When people escape polygamy, there's a lot of fear that comes with escaping. Maybe you didn't have as much fear as many people have. But have you talked to people of their fears of what they left, and what kind of fears did you have? Were you actually afraid of God, or the retribution of God, or the group's retribution for leaving?
I was kind of a little worried about the group's retribution, but not anything else, no. And I do remember being worried that I would run out of money, but even then I had a steady job and I was making $9.50 an hour, so that wouldn't really be
And
a
so
problem.
you didn't need the Kingston group to make sure that your security, financial security, was okay. You didn't need them at all.
Nope.
What about shunning? There is bad shunning going on, massive shunning going on in polygamy groups when you leave. In fact, recently one of the ladies left and her son wrote to her and says, "Don't you ever contact me again. Don't send me a gift because I won't open it. I'll send it back," and that kind of thing. Did you experience any shunning?
I didn't receive that because I guess on the fringe it's a lot less paid attention to.
Some advantages to being on the fringe.
That, and my mom would never let it happen. She's just a sweet woman. She's just amazing. I think
that's nice.
She's just a nice lady. She wouldn't ever let any of my siblings abandon me.
So they also teach some families that if your child stays in the group, you're going to be super blessed. But if your child leaves the group, you're going to pay the cost. Did they teach your parents that?
I remember being taught in a Sunday school lesson, but it was never threatened to me. No, I remember that in a Sunday school lesson. But that's because they repeat the same lessons year after year after year.
So you don't ever learn anything new then?
We do learn a lot of order history, which is pretty much...
Oh, I'm sure it's Clorox, just like the Mormon church history is. What about abuse? Was there abuse in your family? It sounds like you had such an awesome mother that she probably wouldn't have abused a fly. Was there...
She did spank.
Well, spanking's not abuse. There's a difference.
When we were growing up, they were a lot more harsh. There was a point of them using coat hangers and fly swatters, but they've really dialed it back a lot. And then now I see my father, because I have high-functioning autism, and we have a growing suspicion that my younger sister does as well. And he'll call it Asperger's because that's the old term. But I've noticed that when I was growing up, I was spanked for my behavior, and I was like never with a belt, but like fly swatters, coat hangers, that sort of thing. To the point where I would take all the fly swatters and throw them over the fence in the backyard.
Get rid of them, huh?
But that was pretty much the extent of it, and they really have dialed it back a lot. My oldest sister actually, she felt the most, and that's why she's kind of like resentful towards the younger kids, because they realize you don't need to hit your kid to make them behave. If you need to do that, then you raise them wrong.
There's a difference between discipline and child abuse, and we were raised in an extremely abusive family, very, very, very abusive. And some families are and some aren't. You know, it just depends a lot upon the parents. I know that the leadership has taught in the past that they need to train a child how to be obedient before they're old enough to even walk, and they would do waterboarding and hold their and they did that in the early days of the group. I don't know if they still do it. I know some of them have recently.
I haven't really seen any of that.
Yeah.
But I do know that, like, in my family, it's just been reduced, and now it's a lot more.
Good.
I'm really happy about that, because I personally don't think you ever need to like spank a kid. If you do, then in my personal opinion, you've done something wrong to raise them in such a way that they think that the only way they'll not get away with something is if they get hit.
So, would you say your family was less strict than others then in that? And tell me what they did with. I know you told me about the Nestle Quick and all that, but did they have the word of wisdom that they forced you to comply with?
It was kind of like a scale, because my father was like really, really, and he still is. He's very picky about letting anyone in the family hang out with anyone who's not part of the order. Like, he wouldn't let my little brother has to fight tooth and nail just to go over to his friend's house after school, and so the scale was tip in that direction. But then my mom would weigh in, because she knows there's nothing wrong with that. They're kids. They want to play, and so she'd weigh in the other direction, and she almost always got her way, within reason. Like, he'd still fight and push and keep it from happening all the time, but. Jerem, I accidentally used his name. Can we cut that out?
No, it's all right. You didn't say too much. That's okay.
But yeah, like my little brother Jerem, he has friends on the outside, and pretty much all my other brothers and sisters, they do, and they to an extent, are allowed to hang out with them.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we weren't allowed to hang out with anybody that wasn't. Now, there are people who are trapped inside polygamy, and when I say the word trapped, I mean that they would like to get out. They don't have the courage to get out because of religious teaching and threats, and you know, the threats that their parents give them about God and about the group and the religion and all of that. So they're trapped. They're afraid to leave. What would you say to someone who is trapped? They would want to get out, but they're afraid of what's going to happen if they do, and so they stay. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say, for starters, they're telling you that if you don't do as they say, you're going to go to hell. And if that is true, if they're telling you that you can't live your life the way you want, or else you're going to go to hell, then just ask yourself, do you really want to get into heaven on those terms? Sounds like those terms are wrong.
I know my dad told me that. He's going to see to it I got to heaven if he had to kick me all the way there. And I thought, does God really want his heaven filled with people that had to be kicked there?
No,
No.
No. And like, I understand the mindset, like it's scary to leave. And that's why you just got to understand that the most that they can do is try to convince you to stay. Anything above that, the law is on your side.
The law is if you're of age.
If you're of age, yes, that is true.
Yeah. We only have just a little bit left, Caleb. I want to thank you for coming and sharing with our viewers and for being open in what you're saying. And I'm grateful that you got out. I'm grateful that you didn't suffer more than you did while you were in the group, and that you had a mother who cared enough to know what was good for her children and for her marriage, that she didn't allow your father to take a plural wife. That's good, and that's great. Did you, well, I don't think we have time to pursue that question, so I guess we'll have to go with it. So I want to thank you for coming and sharing with us, and I pray God's blessing on your life and for coming with us. Our desire in this ministry has always been to bring biblical truths to polygamists and to help and support escapees in their journey from the oppressive lifelong mind control. Now, God never did command polygamy, and leaving is part of his will. It's not against his will. God is kind, and he's patient, and he's loving, and he opens his arms and always holds them open to receive those who will reject the lies that they've been told about him and discover the wonderful truths of who he really is. The process to that point can be painful, and family will often shun the departing member, and deception and loneliness often keeps that departing member's minds from and their hearts from ever turning to and trusting Jesus. But Jesus is the ultimate lover of our souls, and he proved it on the cross, and he invites all to come to him for forgiveness, salvation, and security. We hope you'll do that. Thank you for watching.